Welcome. Today I want to talk about art, healing, and spirituality and how they absolutely interconnect beautifully and how we can respond in this time of the virus as creatively as possible and joyously as possible, and use all of our skills to benefit beings as we all move through this together. So I'm going to start the slideshow now and talk about some of the extraordinary images that give me courage, as well as how the images connect to the meditation. One of my favorite images has always been Kuan Yin. And she who hears the cries of the world was one of the first inspirations to me to find out about Buddhism. So the traditional Kuan Yin that we see a lot of is on the left, but my favorite Kuan Yin are those depicted in Japan, which show her with 1,000 arms and 11 heads. 11 heads so she can see in all directions, and 1,000 arms so that she can give the appropriate medicine to whoever needs it. So what we need is always in one of her hands. So that is our aspiration, that is our view, but we start where we are. And for many of us today, we're starting with just what is. I know I'm in the most vulnerable group because I had pneumonia in December. And so I'm in the group that should be self-isolating. So I start with the 5 remembrances, and I have for many, many years found them to be so helpful in terms of grounding me. I am of the nature to grow old. There's no way to escape growing old. And I had so much fun at a recent meeting with His Holiness. I asked someone to take a picture, and I realized that it was almost the same picture as we took on my ordination day over 20 years ago. So I'm of the nature to grow old, and here he and I are growing old. I'm of the nature to have ill health. There's no way to escape having ill health. I'm of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. Holiness is changing. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground on which I stand. So this is reminding us to accept the nature of life altogether and to behave with fearless generosity. So the other image about healing that's been tremendously important to me spiritually is white Tara. So in the family of compassion, we have the female emanations of compassion, white Tara and green Tara. White Tara is especially for healing, and green Tara is for compassion and activity. So our sense of things is what enlightenment is the realization that Buddha had. And how we understand that realization, how it is embodied, and how we learn about the qualities is by creating all of these images over time. And it's a little like light passing through a crystal. When it passes through a crystal, it divides into all of the colors. So we have all of these different colors of deities, and you might find one particularly useful to you. And so one old friend, monk I knew early on, said, well, it's just like you go into a store and some people like blue dresses and some people like green dresses. So there's always an emanation of compassion that's just right for you. So in the same way, hearing about Kuan Yin with 1,000 arms or Chenrezig with 1,000 arms was the symbol of compassion that drew me actually to Buddhism, that made me attracted and made me curious and wanting to study. There's an image that may do that for you as well. And so it's like a doorway. And so within the family of Taras, there's one special practice called the 21 Taras. And it turns out there's a Tara that's especially for the time of epidemics. And this is Lady Parneshvari, and she's quite incredible. So she has the energetic posture of being ready to leap off her cushion. But instead of being attired in royal dress, she's attired in leaves. And so she's said to be a tribal lady of the forest who understands medicine, and she's holding medicine in her hand. And one of the other teachings says that her eyes are like the sun and moon. And one eye, the eye like the sun, destroys diseases. And the other eye, like the moon, brings beings back to health. So there is a practice, and you can find out more about her and about the practice on the Vajradakini Nunnery website. But for right now, there's that sense of what is the right image of healing for now. And so there's the light coming from our eyes and from our hearts, just destroying the ignorance that's pervasive right now, the energy that manifests in the virus, and sending out healing light, cooling healing light for all those who are ill and wish to get better. So the last line of the practice is, may I embody her and may I bring everyone to that state. So that is our great aspiration. So here we are in this moment, seeing that there can easily be confusion arising and mixed feelings. And this is a quote by Shantideva: just for every moment of life, we can never take and turn aside the outer course of things, but only seize and discipline the mind itself and what is there remaining to be curbed. So this is really quite important. I'm trying to go back. Oh, there, that will go back. Because when we get to White Tara, who is the Tara for healing, we have to understand what healing actually is. And the incredible teaching of White Tara is that she was a princess and she had leprosy, which was the terrible disease of her time. And she traveled to a distant temple where there was supposed to be a statue that could heal people who came on pilgrimage. And she got there and they wouldn't let her into the temple because she had leprosy. So she sat outside the gate and she just was happy practicing there and content, and people could see her joy and made her offerings. And the statue, it said, manifested a tear which rolled across the dusty courtyard through the gate and touched the hem of her robes, and she became enlightened. So what actually happened? She did not physically get better. It wasn't necessarily about her body getting better. It was the realization that in this moment, there is perfection. In this moment, there is spaciousness that is flavored by loving kindness. There is an open, fearless heart. And so in all of the stories about healing in the Tibetan tradition, some people get better, some people don't. But the important thing is the healing is the realization they have of the fearless, open heart. So this is, we might say, the example of mind, of the nature of mind itself. It's just complete, vivid, awake, open spaciousness. And as I was saying, the taste of that is loving kindness. However, we normally are not in that state. We are in the state where we are continuously seeing self and other, and we're overwhelmed by multiple kinds of thoughts, floods and torrents of thoughts. So I like this photograph because it shows the open sky, but we don't look at the sky, we look at the island. So we're occupied, even though the sky is always there, we're occupied with appearances of, the coffee cup that's near me, the beloved friend who is not me, so is therefore other. And we miss that the sky is there. And so then we also can consider that similarly, our thoughts are in the spaciousness of mind, in the vivid alertness of mind, but they are not mind themselves. So once we start to examine our thoughts, we see that they are moving and passing and changing. So even if we're worried about something, the quality of that worry changes minute to minute. And if someone were to phone and tell me a joke, I would laugh. So there's never a time where the thoughts are so dense, like cement, that they can't be interrupted. They are in the context of mind. They are actually mind itself, moving like waves, but they are not the nature of mind, which is the extraordinary, beautiful, open, fearless, vivid, awakened heart. So how do we work with what we're going through right now? And in the early part of my life, I was an artist. And when I was thinking about the fear that came from illness and the anger came from illness, I found that it was tremendously helpful to give expression to that. And this connects with what we understand about meditation in a very direct way. So if we're feeling sad or anxious about the movement of the virus through the world, and we start to say, okay, I'm going to see what shape is that? What color is that? What does it look like? And then we start working with some sort of material, like you would smell the earthiness of the clay or see the watercolors soaking into the paper. Essentially, what we're doing is following the advice that Buddha gave in the early sutras, which is change the subject. If we are thinking about the water on the paper, we are not thinking about our worries and anxiety. It's a way of simply changing the channel and seeing a bigger picture. And awakening our curiosity and joyfulness as we actually enjoy the process of making. And it's tremendously helpful to sort of name and communicate. So many things we can't communicate in words, but I have to say, this feeling down here on the right is a depiction of Khenmo. And I could tell you what Khenmo feels like, but it would be easier and better and more complete for me to show you this picture. That's what Khenmo actually is. I know in the early days when I was working in hospice, I would feel myself compelled to, just very quickly draw something. And the feelings I had working with people as they were dying and seeing death up close as a very young person were so intense that to somehow get them out of me allowed me to actually see that there was more going on than just what seemed a little frightening. For instance, this was the first death I experienced of a very close friend. And she was sort of calling out and moaning. But when I did the drawing, I remembered the perfection of the compassionate care that her partner was giving her. And now this picture is not about the fear I had walking in the door, it's about the compassion that was so evident. And I had a wonderful time when I was teaching at the Maine College of Art, inviting other people to explore this kind of relationship with the arts. And this is someone who was working with trauma, expressing what the trauma was and visualizing what the healing would be. So that would be the next stage, really not only changing the channel of your mind out of the confusing emotion or the strong emotion, but then envisioning the path forward that takes you where you want to go, which is the beautiful, open, loving heart. And so part of visualization as an artist is very similar to the visualization as a meditator. We imagine ourselves as Lady Pardaneshvara, we imagine ourselves perfected and having the capacity to benefit beings in that beautiful way. In the same way, we imagine the perfection of health and embodying that health as a path towards that health. So all of this helps us see that as we're moving through these times, just the same as moving through a personal illness, we're developing tremendous strengths. I was always impressed by the Native American tradition of becoming a healer. And in order to do that, you had to survive a near-death illness. And then you would paint on your robes that you would wear as a shaman the things you learned, the beings that helped you, the medicine that you found. And I particularly enjoy in the Tibetan tradition and understanding that the strong emotions in and of themselves are not bad. The strong emotions are powerful, and they can help us see the nature of mind, and they are inseparable from the nature of mind. It's just the perspective or the view about them. So I love, that there are these wild flames that are destroying ignorance, and the incredible, you can see in both of the slides, the incredible depiction of our journey in life. They're wearing a crown of skulls because they have conquered the strong emotions, anger, hatred, jealousy, etc. And so that becomes the jewels in their crown, which I find extraordinary. And I've always gravitated towards Ekajati here on the right because she has one breast, and as a breast cancer survivor, it was the first image I ever saw of a wild woman with one breast. It has incredible symbolism that goes much deeper into that, but just the fact that she's dancing on her ignorance and burning away the ignorance of all sentient beings, to me is something that I get great inspiration from. So then the wrathful continues into annual dances and seasonal dances, where the meditators embody the wrathful deities. So the wrathful deities have the appearance of great wrath, but they, in the inner level, have that open, peaceful, loving kindness state of mind, but they give the appearance to drive away forces, energies, beings that only understand the wrathful appearance. And I found it quite wonderful to see that every culture has a version of this. And so this is on the right is an African mask that would be paraded through the village if there was an epidemic to scare away the epidemic. And I just thought that there was an understanding that both had, that there needed to be an acting out, a community acting to dispel the ignorance forcefully, and that was beneficial, and it was a universal community feeling. And then there's also sound, using sound. So these are Tibetan seed syllables. And this is the compassion mantra, but there's an understanding that the sound itself can embody the essence of the particular Buddha you're working with or the practice you're working with, which is to say peaceful compassion or wrathful compassion. And we can understand that there's a vibratory field that is affected with these sounds. So we can see all of the confusion that's heightened with the news and the our attention to the daily counts of how many people in our area. It's almost as though there's a frisson going around the world, and that can be countered by the mantras, and where we're allowing our body to vibrate and our minds to vibrate with the sound of compassion. So using the arts in every conceivable way to work with our own ignorance, to work with the ignorance we see arising, and to create a field of energy that brings people back to their innate compassion, their innate good nature, their desire to be fearless and generous. The ultimate healing in the Tibetan tradition, you may be familiar with, are the practices that use sand mandalas. And this was another doorway for me into Tibetan Buddhist practice, just seeing the sand mandalas being made. And when I wanted to learn more about them, I went to India for the first time, and the monks there said, well, you're an artist, of course we can show you how to make the sand mandala, but in order to understand mandala, you have to understand Buddhism and understand the practice. So I began to understand that the sand mandalas are a blueprint of a temple. So people are using the sand mandala to visualize this incredible three-dimensional temple, which they walk into in their visualization. And they meet the different Buddhas there, and then everything dissolves into the mind of the meditator, and then that dissolves into the clear open space. So there's a sense of imagining the healing of the world that's needed, sitting and becoming inseparable from that vision of the healing, then having it dissolve into that open realization, which is the actuality of that healing. So then the sand mandala is swept up, and for everyone it's a teaching of impermanence, this extraordinary artwork that disappears. And for this moment that we're in, I see that all of my plans for the future, large plans and small plans, have suddenly evaporated, and I have that direct moment of understanding impermanence, and how I had been, building this whole vision of my future, which now is open space. So it's always a teaching. And then what I really love is then the sand, which has the essence of all of the prayers, is poured into a body of water, and then that water is carried through the rain cycle across the whole planet. So there's that sense of the individual having the realization, doing the practice so that they can benefit others, and then physically pouring the sand, merging it with the elements of the water, the air, and eventually the earth again, bringing all of the prayers into the physical reality. So there are some simple suggestions if you want to start working with spirituality, meditation, and art that can be very helpful. And I find it a wonderful practice to do. So first you would start by just sitting in meditation and allowing your mind to relax, allowing the thoughts to simply fall away as you focus on your breathing in and out. And you might have some water and a brush and a pad of paper near you. But the first thing to do is to just simply sit and allow your mind to relax. And as close as possible, allow your thoughts to dissipate. Then to work with whatever medium brings you joy. And I've always loved Ikebana, the Japanese Zen tradition of arranging flowers. So when I practice Ikebana, for me, it's a way of creating space, capturing the fresh moment of an open mind, and doing it with the same sense of mindfulness that I might be watching my thoughts in meditation, looking at one element, appreciating that element, placing it in space, and then starting again with another element. My mother did Ikebana. We had lived in Japan when I was a child. So I've always had a deep connection. People who go into it more deeply work with impermanence. In the old tradition, there was always a bud about to bloom, a flower in full blossom, and then something sort of decaying, reminding us of impermanence. And some people work with finding a way to symbolize earth, the rudeness of earth, and then heaven and the skies above, or the three jewels. There are many, many ways to work with Ikebana. I also like the rock gardens in Japan. And I find where I'm living now, I might try and do something, because there's a sense in these small areas, even small areas of the city, that these rock gardens were created, and all of a sudden you have the spaciousness of your mind. So no matter what situation we're in, we can always have our mind in that extraordinary, relaxed, open state. But the rock gardens give us some perspective of openness. In the same way, just looking at that wonderful view of the ocean and contemplating how we set up self and other, where the openness is, how to relax into the openness. This one is a very famous one, and it is the journey to enlightenment. And you can see the gradual emergence and moving into space of the rock that's closest to us. And then this is the very traditional Zen practice of creating the enso. And as I always said, if you had your pen and brush and a pad and even just water next to you, you could relax as best you can into a meditative state, just watching your breath and then allowing the thoughts to subside. And in the same way that you might do walking meditation with the same mindfulness, picking up a brush and making a mark. And I think the great Zen practitioners saw how extraordinary it was to actually capture a moment of non-thought. And some of these circles done by some of the great masters really are a teaching about emptiness, as well as being beautiful artworks. And some of the contemporary versions are fun as well. Often the master might write a poem or an insight. And for those who don't understand Japanese or Chinese, that becomes, another set of interesting marks. But you probably all know Thich Nhat Hanh and how he has started putting the poem into English. And so this is another thing we can play with and work with in terms of holding that meditative state and contemplating an idea, contemplating maybe the word that for you means relaxed mind, or the word for you that stills fear, and just allowing in that meditative state to work with that one word, so that the shape of the word has the feeling that you give to it. There's another Thich Nhat Hanh without the circle. And this came from Sikkim. This is one of the traditional dance practices. And I wanted to end with this because I love it in terms of fearlessness. So this is a wrathful protector. So in the sutras, when there's strong emotions, the Buddha gave a series of instructions. He said, well, you can practice an antidote. So if you're very angry at someone, practice loving kindness. You can change the subject that's in your mind. You can do walking meditation. But he said, if all else fails, just grit your teeth and hold your breath. That the physicality of doing that will move you out of anger or move you out of fear. And so in the Tibetan tradition, we actually work with that in terms of the syllable fet. And fet has been used to stop the mind as well as to ward off anything that's threatening. And really the only thing that's threatening is our own ignorance. So this is a wrathful dancer. And usually the greatest meditation masters are asked to be the dancers because they hold the meditative state of the deity that they're embodying while they're doing the dance. So I love this as a just physical and sound. You know, ignorance, you are not going to enslave me. I do not give you power over my mind. Anger, I don't give you power over mind. Fear, I don't give you power over my mind. With all the love, I'm going to cut through that. I get such a kick out of this slide. So then I want to leave you with a final thought about giving some sort of physical image to the aspiration that we have. And this is probably the bodhisattva for right now. This is Kishtagarbha. And Kishtagarbha is a really inspiring bodhisattva from the Lotus Sutra who makes a vow to remain in the hell realms until there are no longer beings in the hell realms. So he is continuously in the hell realms as a light so that people can find the Dharma. And so it reminds us that in any situation, no matter what situation, no matter how difficult it is, we can hold that light and hold that for all sentient beings and be in the same way we have on the coast of Maine a lighthouse that shows people where the path to their own inner perfection is. And I'm contrasting that by a poem from one of the early nuns. This is my favorite poem. It's by the Venerable Kala. And it's been on my mind probably for a year because it always feels like there's something confusing going on in the world. And so she says, all the world is on fire, all the world is burning, all the world is ablaze, all the world is quaking, just the way it feels right now. That which does not quake or blaze, that does not which quake or blaze, that inner realization of spacious, fearless, loving kindness that is always there, that to which worldlings do not resort, where there is no place for Mara, that is where my mind delights. So when we are caught up in the craziness or the confusion or the ignorance, then we are a worldling. So we are not resorting or turning to the perfection in our own minds. When we are caught up, we want to run out and buy all the hand sanitizer, all the groceries, everything. That's Mara saying, oh, you have to be attached to everything that will protect you. But she is saying that which does not quake or blaze, I have that inside. That is where my mind delights. In the midst of whatever realm we find ourselves in, there is a joyousness in the present moment of spacious perfection. So it's not only my mind is relaxed or at peace, my mind delights. So I invite you to use these images and practices to cultivate your own fearlessness, to find inspiration. I encourage you to become playful and creative, to see what you might do if you were to pick up a pen or a brush, and to have confidence that inside we are Kala, we are Kishtagarbha, we are Parshnavashvara, we are Vaitara. We are that joyful, healing expansion, continuous expansion of love that is nothing but vivid awake space. So we will be adding more videos and Dharma talks regularly. So check our website periodically and rejoice that we have so many ways to work with this situation. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher.